Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 24 of Lean Whiskey. I'm Mark Graven. It's just me and Jamie today. Jamie, thanks for being here.
Yeah, good to be here, Mark. It's been a while, just the two of us, and been a while. It feels like 2 years since our last episode, anyway. So
Yeah, time flies here.
glad to be here.
It's been great having other guests, but it's also fun. It's easier just to also chat. It's good to just do the one-on-one, just the two of us.
Well, and this all started right with you and I talking about us hanging out late night, find a good whiskey bar and talk shop over a glass, and just carry that into a podcast. So yeah, kind
Yeah.
of return to the norm, return to the original vision.
Yeah. I'm sure someday we'll be able to record one in person.
That would be cool. We'll have to find a whiskey bar that'll let us, rent them out for a Tuesday night or some other slow night, and
Yeah.
sit there with a wall of whiskey behind us and do an episode in a whiskey bar or each other's living rooms at some point. So we'll make one of those
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. So I was thinking beforehand, I always try to reemphasize with all the different podcasts I'm hosting right now, like don't say the wrong podcast name. But the fact that I've got alcohol in front of me, this is the only podcast that I drink during.
Well, I think we should measure, right? So we can't tell. I mean, I guess we could tell. We don't know what's in your coffee mug when you're in other podcasts. So, we don't really know. But if we catch a lot of mistakes in one of your other podcasts, then maybe we know that. Then maybe that's the case.
I make so many mistakes sober. I might make fewer mistakes on this one. But
This is lean.
so hey, I'm going to suggest.
This is lean whiskey.
Lean whiskey. So I'm going to suggest actually we do an audible compared to the plan and go to the beverage and then talk about the something new that we're doing, because we've actually made something, and I know we don't want it to sit here. Well, I mean, it's not that it would go bad, but
No, but we are anxious to get started with that, so we might as well jump into that. So our category, which we haven't done anything like this before, is homemade whiskey cream. Known to more people more as Irish cream, as Bailey's is the original, the inventor,
yeah,
and there's really only from the 70s, and they figured out they could put cream and whiskey together along with some other things that they refined it to make it work, and it's been on shelves and been a favorite of mine for quite a long time, but uh, it's gotten more expensive than I think it's worth, and B, you know it's not that rich. It's good, but it can be better, and so we're
yeah.
making our own homemade whiskey creams today.
Because I mean that whiskey cream, it's a category, and I've had other whiskey creams, and we'll put a link to the origin story in the show notes. It's really more of a corporate invention along the lines of like 3M creating Post-it notes more than it was like some plucky little startup that then got acquired.
Oh, it has all the hallmarks of that. They hired a consultant. The consultants made something up. They put it in the lab. They refined it and figured it out. And it was all to market, export Irish whiskey in a different package because they didn't have enough demand. So it's as corporate as can get, right? But that's okay. I
Yeah.
don't mind as long as it's good.
My computer comes from a corporation. My car comes from a corporation. I mean, corporations can make cool stuff. Don't get me
Absolutely.
wrong.
But homemade Irish
So
cream or homemade whiskey cream, I guess it's really only Irish cream if you put in Irish whiskey, but homemade whiskey
yeah,
cream, I will say, in my first attempt, and I haven't tasted this second attempt yet, is better than the original. So we both have different versions. Mine's a little more of the norm, I'll say, from a recipe standpoint. So um, we'll put the recipes of both up. I'd say the only differences for mine, compared to what most people might be expecting, it has the coffee in there. It has vanilla, obviously the we use the whipping cream and the condensed milk. Um, but I used rye for mine, Sazerac rye,
Huh.
which I think adds, just a little bite, and not too much sweetness because I don't want too much sweetness.
Yeah.
And then the almond extract, which
Hmm.
I can really taste, not in an overpowering way, but I can tell the difference between this and another recipe is the almond, um,
Yeah.
and it's good. Really comes out well.
Yeah. That rye would be fun with that spice note, kind of adding a little more to it.
Yeah, it works.
So mine, I mean, so the one issue with some whiskey with whiskey creams or even the homemade stuff is that the condensed milk has a good amount of sugar in it,
Hmm.
and I've been trying to lose a little weight. I've really been trying to stay away from sugar. I'm no Tom Brady when it comes to staying away from sugar, but for most of the month, then I'm down like 7 or 8 pounds, but I'm trying to keep that up, and so I made a low carb slash keto whiskey cream, and it tastes good. So same thing. It has cocoa powder. Well, let me go back to the recipe. I used a Florida whiskey, which I don't think we've ever talked about Florida whiskey
No.
on the podcast. This is a bottle I got when we used to live there. It's Palm Ridge Reserve, handmade micro batch Florida whiskey. So it's not labeled as a bourbon or or whatever, anything. I don't know the mash bill. It might not be 51% corn. It tastes to me like corn, rye, more of even proportions
Okay.
instead of, if it was 51% something, they would label it as something more specific than whiskey. So it's the whiskey, heavy cream, cocoa powder, instant espresso powder, vanilla extract, and almond extract.
Okay.
And so all together, like and then a powdered artificial sweetener called Swerve, which in my experience doesn't have like a real artificial sweetener aftertaste to it. So like what I'm tasting here, for one, it's not really sweet to begin with, but it's complex.
Hmm.
There's all these different flavors going on.
Right.
The one thing I did do though when I made it, it was really thick, like milkshake thick, and so I added some almond milk to it
Okay.
just to get the texture right. I should have added a little bit more whiskey because at this point, like I mean, I can taste the whiskey, but it's more of a slightly boozy milkshake,
Okay.
perhaps. But that tastes good.
That's not bad. I can definitely taste the whiskey. Now a lot of recipes are out there promoting a particular brand of whiskey, but honestly,
Mm-hmm.
that's just personal choice. So, I have several ryes on my shelf, but um, most of the others I prefer neat or on ice, but generally just neat. And more so than the Sazerac. So I wanted to choose a rye, but as far as using it as a mixer, that was both cheaper and not one I enjoy straight as much as the others. Um, so that was kind of how I made my choice, and I wanted the slight edge and spice that the rye gives you. I think it's a good combination with
Yeah.
the sweetness. Um, so how'd you choose the Palm Ridge bourbon?
Um, so it's like on its own, it's fine. It's young. There's no age statement on it. It might be aged maybe just a year, because again, they're not calling it straight bourbon whiskey where there's a minimum age to it. Um, so I mean, frankly, I tried it because I didn't mind wasting it if this recipe turned out bad.
Yep.
Um, so it's a whiskey I liked good enough, but I wasn't. I mean, like I've got some Sazerac in the cabinet. That's only like a $20 bottle.
Yeah, it's
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 really
it's
good
really quite
for the
affordable
price.
for what you get because it is something I can drink neat and not complain about. So yeah,
Yeah.
Sazerac rye works pretty well.
Okay.
I do have a cheaper whiskey that I actually don't like drinking neat. I keep looking for reasons to mix it, but I keep choosing other things that I prefer. but I was worried I'd mess up this batch because I was trying it. This is the first sip I've had of this batch, so um, was worried it'd be a bad batch. So I maybe trying that next just to see what it's like. But yeah, the
Yeah.
rye. I have to say using rye for whiskey cream is a good choice. I think I'll go back to that for sure.
Yeah. Now, the only Irish whiskey that I have here is a Redbreast 15, which I thought was way too nice to make Irish cream out of.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I actually unusually don't have any Irish whiskey. I keep waiting for a chance to get some yellow spot or
Hmm.
even red spot, which are a couple of my favorites. But just seem to be out. So the next time I do get a chance to get out and get to a whiskey store, I'll maybe
Yeah.
look for some of that. Um, Now, as far as recipes go, maybe I'll have to give yours a shot. I'm not generally, changing my recipes on things from a weight loss standpoint. I'm just trying to do less of it. So, uh,
Sure.
as of 2 days ago, I'm officially down 51 pounds. Um, but that's
Good
more
for you.
from cutting my drinking down to 2 days a week and increasing my exercising and a
Yeah.
few other things. But
Yeah.
this is straight up bad for you. So
Well,
I'm
I'm not doing dry January, but yeah, I've been cutting back for sure. But I was going to say about Sazerac. A couple thoughts come to mind. One of which is lean related, since it's lean whiskey. So Sazerac is the name of the parent company that owns Buffalo Trace
hmm
and all of the great lines of whiskeys, bourbons that come out of Buffalo Trace, including up through the Pappy Van Winkle line. And so Buffalo Trace puts out a whiskey cream, a bourbon cream.
right.
I forget what name they call it, but it comes from Buffalo Trace. I've tasted it there at the distillery. And then Sazerac and the Buffalo Trace distillery actually has a full-time continuous improvement professional working there on site, the guy I know.
It's awesome.
And we had crossed paths because he was working for healthcare, in healthcare in Kentucky, and he came to a healthcare Kaizen workshop that Joe Schwartz and I did. And then there were healthcare cutbacks. This was way before COVID. This was a couple of years ago, and he ended up getting a job at Sazerac. So he's teaching Kaizen. I don't know that much about it to really worry about disclosing something I shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, they're teaching classic Kaizen, small continuous improvement to frontline operators doing testing and running different things. So they don't make cars either, but
Yep.
this Kaizen mindset certainly applies.
Awesome. That's really cool. So yeah, I think it's the second true lean whiskey. David Meyer being the
Yeah.
master distiller, probably still gets top billing there. Um, and I guess they can go next, and we're maybe third since we're really just consuming but not making any whiskey. Um, but our
Yeah.
homemade whiskey cream is a good other choice. If you don't want to make your own, I do recommend Five Farms. It's a it's a smaller brand than Bailey's, and um, besides the packaging being really neat, I think it tastes better than Bailey's, and I think it's cheaper if I remember correctly. But yeah, if you still want to buy stuff off the shelf, I definitely recommend Five Farms as a choice.
Yeah. And there are alternatives out there. So yeah, people can try, figure out what they like. Can I show you one other thing that's whiskey related?
Yeah, fire away.
And this is going to seem like a brag, but dumb luck on my part out here in California. Ralph's grocery store, it's part of Kroger, right? So it's part of big mega grocery store chain. And I was there maybe a month ago, and I looked in their cabinet, their lock cabinet of what kind of good whiskeys do they have. They actually had, believe it or not, Yamazaki 12-year Japanese whiskey. Like, this is whiskey that is so difficult to find. Even when I was in Japan 2 years ago, all the stores there have signs that say, "We do not have Yamazaki." And the one store in Osaka that did have Yamazaki was charging $250, which is well above standard retail. Ralph's, thank you. This is not an endorsement, but I'm just really happy at Ralph's. $79.
Hmm. Well,
And so I haven't opened it yet because this is my hitting 10 pounds
ah,
weight loss motivation. That when I hit 10, I can open this up and try it. So it kind of
that's
sits
fair. That's a
here.
good
That's
reward.
one motivation that I've set up.
I kind of hoped I would have my own little whiskey news because Pennsylvania, which all the liquor stores are still run by the state, um, had a lottery to buy Pappy. And they had, 6 different
Yeah.
varieties, different years, all the way up to 20 something. And you were buying it at retail, up to $300 a bottle or whatever the price is. But it was just a
Right.
lottery to see if you had a chance to win it. And there was quite a few
Mm-hmm.
bottles in it. I actually thought my chances were decent. And I don't know for sure that I lost, but I didn't get a notification that I won. So I am assuming I did not uh, win the right to buy some
No.
Pappy.
Now, when you enter that, are you saying I'm entering for the right to buy this one specific one, or it's just kind of in this general category of like the Buffalo Trace antique collection, as they call it?
Yeah, you could enter for each of the 6 different varieties they were selling. So each of the
Okay.
6 different ages, and so I entered all 6. They would only give you one bottle if you won in 2 different bottles,
Sure.
um, and that included households. They were pretty clear. If you and your
Huh.
wife both register to win, you can't
Yeah.
do that. And of course, they have the data. So and you had to do a lot. You had to tell them which store you'd be picking it up at, and have all your credit card in their system ahead of time. And but this is state run. It's not like a local store that can kind of give their favorite customers the right to buy it as a reward. They kind of have to do something a little more democratic, if you will, um,
Yeah.
or at least unbiased,
The,
as a state-run store.
yeah. The stores in Texas, some of them, I think the bigger chains tend to run it as a promotion where they want you to enter, but then there are certainly some stores where it is based off of big spenders and connections and friendships, and
Yeah,
so it goes.
and that's okay. I have no problem with a small store rewarding their best customers with the chance to buy something that's hard to get. That's good for them.
Yeah.
Uh,
But for the liquor stores, at least I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it works different with the state stores, but I've heard when you've got these corporate conglomerates that the liquor stores, if they want access to the really high end stuff, they have to buy and move a boatload of, let's say, the cheap vodka that's part of their product line.
yeah,
So there are things like that happen within. But auto dealerships, I think, like Chevy dealers, to get access to the top Corvettes, they have to move a crap ton of pickup trucks and other product to get access to those
it's
Corvettes.
really common mechanism. I mean, if Rolex, like if you want a steel sports watch Rolex, Submariner or a Daytona, really, really hard to find, super long waiting lists. But for stores to get them, they got to sell a whole bunch of gold Datejusts and other watches that uh, and keep moving the precious metals to customers if they want their allotment of these hard to get steel sports watches. So yeah, it's not an uncommon practice in any realm. You do have to wonder to some degree. I mean, certainly they make money off of it, but if you have product that is so bad that you've got to force people to take it and to push it,
Hmm.
maybe you should make less money and just sell better product. But that's just me.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
if I were running the store.
yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for doing this experiment.
yeah, yeah, no, it's a great experiment, and I've had a chance to do something new. Always had some Baileys in the house, so started switching it up first with the Five Farms, and now with homemade, which I'm not sure I'll go back to anything else. I'll just keep doing this. It does keep.
Yeah.
You don't have to drink it
Hmm.
the weekend you made it. So as long as you refrigerate it, mine's in a washed out orange juice bottle. So you know, make some at
Yeah.
home, put it in the fridge, have it whenever you want. Put it in your coffee on the weekend. Um, I would be one of those on a Delta flight that would on flights home, usually not almost never outbound, but if I had an early morning flight, a coffee with Bailey's isn't a bad choice. And I used to joke that tailgating and traveling are two excuses to drink in the morning. Um, I'm not sure if there's any other legitimate ones, but those are both seem to be accepted. So
the the Bailey's in the coffee is a little more subtle than the Bloody Mary
yeah, the Bloody
at
Mary,
7:30 in the morning on a plane.
that's straight up straight up clear what it is. But yeah, it's not uncommon for me to do that on my trips home in the early morning. Grab myself
Yeah.
because flying was
Yeah.
stressful enough, or traveling was plenty of stress. So nice little Bailey's and the coffee on the way home,
Yeah.
a reward for your trip.
Yeah.
Small little price to pay, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I don't understand, thinking back to when I was on planes, and I'll sound judgmental here, and it's fine, is beer at 7 in the morning. I'm not a big beer drinker anyway, but
No, I haven't had a beer yet
not
this
7
year,
a.m.
but yeah, I mean, I guess again, tailgating, beer in the morning is
Yeah.
pretty common. So I guess if you're going to drink in the morning, then drink what you prefer, and if that happens to be beer, then that's that. But yes, it does. It does. Now it seems strange for us to be saying that hard alcohol is more acceptable at 7 in the morning than just beer, but you know, to each their
I'm,
own. We have our own
I'm,
standards.
I'm, I'm judgmental and a hypocrite,
It's
so
fine.
that's a not an unusual combination.
We're on a podcast. We can. It's our opinions, so
Yeah.
we offer them as such.
Yeah. So Jamie, so next we're going to talk about the thing we were going to use as more of an intro, but now that we've got our homemade whiskey cream in us, we're going to talk about something new that we're doing. So Jamie, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I guess a couple of new things. So one is, I don't know if this is new, but it's new news. Is a little less than a week ago, I finished the first manuscript of my next book. Um, by no means as
That's
prolific
great.
as you when it comes to writing, period, let alone books. But it's been 12 years since my last one, so the manuscript's done. Met with the illustrator this week, met with the editor this week, and off and running. So lots of work left to do, but having a manuscript done is a nice relief, and
Yeah.
had a good chunk of last year on it. I was planning on writing it anyway. Um, Not sure the pandemic helped me write it, but either way, it's it's done and in the books, if you as it is. So
Well, the manuscript is done, and now there's a lot more to do, right? So you shared it on LinkedIn, and I commented, and a lot of people are congratulating you, and there's still like bringing it to market. You still have more to do, right?
absolutely, lot more to do. Still, literally undecided on a publisher or not a publisher. I'll really only have one publisher I'd probably work with, but and quite frankly, it doesn't even have a title yet. The theme is around the people side of problem solving, uh, meaning the behaviors, the leadership, the coaching, the skills. So it's sort of tool agnostic. I'm a big
Mm-hmm.
tree fan for sure, but it's really not about the tools, and it really applies to any tool. So it's really the people side of problem solving. And so listeners are welcome to suggest titles. Doesn't have a title yet. Um, Lots of work left to do, but got several folks lined up to help, and publication forthcoming.
Great.
And then my,
So let's do it. Hmm.
yeah, I was going to say my other new thing this week was
So before we get to that, I was just going to say, just to wrap up on the book,
yeah,
let's have a separate conversation with a drink or two, maybe not recorded, or hell, maybe a future episode about self-publishing. And you're already hiring people to help you out. You're maybe partway down that track.
yep, I am partway down that track, and I have a lot more research to do. So I'm not very literate in that domain yet. My last book was published by Society of Manufacturing Engineers. They were good partners. They kind of came to me and said, "Hey, you want to do a book?" So I didn't even shop around. They said, "Hey, you want to do a book?" I said, "Sure." 6 months later, we had a
Right.
book. So um,
That's how lean hospitals happened. It was them approaching me. Hey, we need someone to write an introductory book about lean in healthcare. And hell, if you get that opportunity, take it. But yeah, well, I'd be happy to talk through pros and cons
yeah,
with you and help you
I'll share an
decide.
interesting tidbit because a couple people asked me about this just around writing. Because you write, like I said, you write even more than I do, and I always felt I was fairly prolific. Although I've taken a lot of the last 5 years off from significant writing. Um, but when I wrote the first book, I wanted to be distraction free because when I'm in my office or when I have the internet on or whatever, it's like other things happen. I need like hours of getting into a flow and a rhythm. So when I wrote my first book, I would actually go to Starbucks because they didn't have Wi-Fi, and so I could sit there without any disturbances, without any email interruptions, and get a lot of writing done for several hours. So that's a far cry from what Starbucks is today. But I went to Starbucks specifically because they did not have Wi-Fi. And so this time, since I didn't have a lot of places I could go, I actually went up to the Poconos, the mountains in
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, and did most of the writing there, or probably 95% of the writing up in the mountains, so that I would be more distraction free, several days blocked off at a time. So
There's probably something to be said for putting your device in airplane mode or turning off Wi-Fi
yep,
for that good focused writing.
absolutely. I did write a lot of it on Google Docs, which, in retrospect, probably was a mistake, but yeah, is what it
Mm.
is. So um,
So, well, this isn't my favorite mistake, but why? It's probably not a favorite, but why'd you think that was a mistake? I wrote my last book in Google Docs. I
Well, just
thought it
because I
worked
was
out.
online, right? I wasn't to be in Google Docs. I wasn't in offline
Mm,
mode. I was usually in live mode, and so it was always backed up. And I know, again,
mm,
workarounds around all of that, but the internet wasn't off. The tabs with my email were closed, but the internet
yeah.
wasn't fully off, and so probably could have still done better. But like I said, got it done one way or the other, so we're all good.
Yeah. I just one other thought before we'll get to your other new thing. You can either on YouTube or I think even through the music services, if you want that coffee shop background noise, you can bring that into your home actually, if that helps you get into that zone.
Yeah, no, I've done all sorts of background noises from nature sounds to coffee shops, and then my favorite is a like a 3 hour loop YouTube video of an ancient library or something like that. It's a crackling fireplace,
Hmm.
lightning out the window, and a little thunder, um, and so yeah, set the mood. I'll do some of that. Or I also worked my way through a playlist of the top 50 saxophone jazz musicians. So kind of one by one through all 50 on a list. I forget where I got the list, but worked my way through at
Yeah.
least the top 10 songs from each of those 50 artists as part of my background music. So that was fun too.
Very cool. Well, congratulations again on that significant book milestone.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll talk more about the content coming up, but it's
Yeah.
another time, another place. So yeah, so then my other experiment is it's actually over on my office. We had a small evergreen that was gifted to us. One of my only three social engagements since the pandemic started, which was uh, all three were outdoors at a distance, but they brought over this little evergreen and a potted evergreen, and it was starting to get a little big. Whereas the point where it's like, all right, I'm going to have to grow this until the spring and then go outside and plant it. Uh,
Hmm.
but a practice I was always fascinated by was bonsai. So I thought,
Hmm.
let me give that a shot. So I watched multiple videos, bought a wire kit, a special wire kit for bonsai. I did not go as far as getting the special pots or anything else because this is a first experiment. And I converted this bush to a first effort bonsai. Um,
Wow.
way too
So
early to
you
see how
gotta
it turns out. But
you gotta run and go get it real quick for those who are watching on YouTube
all right,
who can hang on.
we'll do that. That's fair enough.
You know, I'll edit the blank space maybe out of the audio podcast, or I'll just put in a blatant plug for my favorite mistake if people are looking for another new podcast to listen to. Okay, show us your work here,
Well,
Jamie. Wow.
the sparkly is the wire, and the wire has to sit there for 4 to 12 months to really reshape it. But this was really a bush
Wow.
that was, almost getting to be like that. 5 different trunk branches. So they're, as bonsai works, a lot of trimming goes in and a lot of shaping goes in. Um, so I probably lost about a third of the bush at least in trimming, and we'll see how this turns out. So it's going to need to sit for a while, and if I don't kill it, then we'll see. Then maybe I'll try different varieties and do a few more. I don't want enough bonsais so that I'm clipping them every week, but um, having 2 or 3 that I clip every few months is about the right sized hobby for me.
So you don't have to work at it, play with it, tweak it every single day.
No, and I do have to water it, but it's in my office, and like when I was traveling, of course, that was impossible. But now that I'm working
Yeah.
from home, not too hard to remember to water it at least every other day. So not
I
terribly hard.
I mean, I since I'm home and I don't have to water them that much, and they're probably overdue for it. I have 2 little real tiny cacti on my desk.
Nice.
There's another one that died, so I can't even keep
Well, my
cactus alive.
daughter just went back to college yesterday, and she bought herself four small cacti and brought them with her, and she doesn't have a chance to leave her room much because not quite a lot of restrictions on campus.
Yeah,
So should
yeah,
should be able to monitor and take care of them since her office and bedroom and dining room are kind of all the same room. So
yeah. I do have some fairly realistic plastic succulents over here on this other desk that I think my wife bought. So maybe I'll just stick to that.
I haven't done.
But good for you, learning a new skill here.
Yeah, I watched several videos. I didn't read books or take a course yet, but if I went a little further, I'd probably at least take a video course and give it a shot. Um, and learn. I don't need mastery, but enough to be sufficient at it. So speaking of courses, you have some fun news too.
Yeah, I'm taking a course, not for mastery per se, definitely not a career direction change, but just for something interesting to do and for the learning and why not. So I'm taking there. So there's an organization called WSET, the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. And so I am going through right now, I'm in the middle of it. This is after week 3 out of 5, what they call their level 2 spirits course. And so you can skip level 1 because looking at the curriculum for level 1, I'm like, okay, I don't think I would have learned a whole lot there.
Mm-hmm.
But with the level 2 course, I am learning, and so I've learned, like last week, I've learned a lot about tequila and mezcal, which is probably maybe not close second, but after whiskey, I like tequila. Good sipping tequila and aged añejo tequila is not too. I mean, it's different flavor, but the character can be like a whiskey. And I've learned more about the mechanics of distilling. And again, I'm not going to go like David Meyer and start a distillery, but just learning more of the detail of how a column still works, for example. So I'm kind of just doing it for the fun and, go past the certification. It's sort of like having a whatever belt, Six Sigma belt. Some people get that certification and they maybe don't use it. That might be the same with me in this, but I'm doing a whiskey podcast. Why not do some spirits education? There is a bourbon specialist course that I don't know, maybe I'll take, or my wife will say, okay, stop spending money on this whiskey education and go write another book.
I'm sure anything that keeps you busy is all good. If it was a whiskey specific course, I'd probably, I mean, that'd be the perfect middle for me because I still generally prefer Scotch over bourbon. I like all whiskeys, but if I had to limit myself to one, it would probably be Scotch. Uh, and I don't really drink really any vodka or anything like that. But
Yeah.
I pretty limited. Generally, it's either wine or whiskey is my limits. But yeah, it's really fascinating to get that education, and I know they target like store owners or store
Bartenders.
bartenders and people that are basically in the trade of plying spirits. But yeah, I mean, knowing what's what, knowing what's real and what's just marketing and
Mm-hmm.
I'll say not being taken, knowing as much as your bartender uh, is probably a
Yeah.
worthwhile thing to do and just fun, right? Because I've watched videos and documentaries and others about Scotch usually, but it is fun to hear the history and understand all the differences um,
Yeah.
and especially whiskey, right? Because vodka, even if you go to the book, I don't know what the book's called, but the book that lays out the standards for what you can call what, vodka is like 3 lines and whiskey is like 47 pages. Um,
It's often more a matter of law, and it depends on where you are.
right, but quite complex. And so when
Yeah.
you open it up to all spirits, it's quite the complex body. So you're halfway
Yeah.
through. So when do you expect to finish?
Well, there'll be 2 more weeks of the class. It's an online class, of course, and then there'll be an online exam. So maybe by the time we do our next episode, like I won't be able. I don't think I can call myself a spirit sommelier. Like the WSET is one of the 2 organizations that trains and certifies wine somms.
Okay.
I've got a friend of mine who is a um, advanced sommelier through it's like the World Court organization. Like he's one step away from that really rarefied air of being a master somm.
Right.
There's only hundreds of them
Right.
in the world, and then WSET has a wine track, and then I'm doing the spirits track, but just why not? We'll see.
Why not?
Bragging rights, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. So
Thanks.
yeah, we'll have to when you're finished hear how the exam went and maybe your top takeaways. We'll try to wrap those up as well. So
Yeah, I mean, it's just 2 quick points. It's reinforced. Even trying to try a good one that's well regarded. Like I do not like rum. It's just a preference thing.
mhm.
I had grappa for the first time,
Okay.
and that's distilled from the leftover skins of wine
Yep.
grapes in Italy. Grappa is kind of an interesting digestive, so
Yeah,
that's kind of
I have
expanded
had
my
it a
horizons a
few
little.
times, usually while I'm in Europe.
Mhm.
So I have had that a few times. And I think it's definitely an acquired taste. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't something I was looking to order either.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked whiskey. We've talked
We
a
talked.
little bit about lean, thinking about Sazerac, but we're going to shift here more into the hardcore. Let's talk about lean realm if you want to help tee this up, Jamie.
Yeah, it took us a little while. But that's okay. It's the
It's a relaxed podcast.
relaxed
I mean,
podcast. I think we're pretty clear about this. We're recording this on a Sunday night. It's several inches of snow outside. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't have a fireplace in my office, but if I did, it would be on.
yeah.
Um, so setting the mood. So yeah, as far as the topic in the news, we wanted to talk about the vaccination process. We're really just underway and where lean intersects with that. Um, so John Miller, our good friend and longtime
Hmm.
lean author, lean blogger, does not quite as early as you, but you know, very early in terms to the game for sure. But he wrote a
Hmm.
blog
Yeah.
post, how to vaccinate 100 million people in 100 days. There's other stuff we'll talk about as we go. Um, and so just talk about the intersection with lean and the vaccine process. I did want to kind of start with, what I consider a warning with any topic like this. As I read articles about any of these topics, I think the lean community can get a little edgy, a little judgy with some of this.
Mhm.
So a favorite old quote of mine from Dwight Eisenhower is, and I've always loved this quote, is
I
farming.
love this quote too.
This is a great one. Farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the cornfield. Um, so we'll do our best not to pass too much judgment on those in charge at any level. But
Hmm.
we'll talk a bit about how do you take lean thinking into such a complex and messy problem. Um, and you've been posting several articles on this topic on LinkedIn over the
Hmm.
past several days. I don't know if it was just because they're out or because you're ramping up for our discussion, but what are your?
It's a topic I'm trying to keep up with. Yeah.
It is. It is. And then it is moving fast. And actually, talking to a hospital this week that I'm advising, they're learning every day, and that to me is the
Hmm.
almost the number one takeaway is that they are learning every day. But
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, what are
Well, that culture of continuous improvement isn't always there, right? So a lot of times people would have a process forced on them, and there's no mechanism for feedback and kaizen and improvement. Thankfully, there are some hospitals that I've seen share webinars that they participated in. A panel discussion that I moderated recently. We'll link to all this in the show notes. There are some organizations that are following, like John Miller wrote about in his post, basically using a 3P process. They're actually intentionally designing the process. They are designing the work, and that's great to see. And they're I did a podcast with some leaders from Mount Sinai Morningside in New York City. They talked about, in their language, dress rehearsals of their process before patients ever came in. So I think it's like, I think in general, I've always said, the ability to kaizen is not an excuse for not putting time into designing a good process.
Mhm.
But nobody ever designs a perfect process, which is why you need kaizen. So there are bright spots of organizations, I think, doing some really good process improvement work when they already have that foundation of lean thinking in place. But we know that's not universal.
Yep. Yeah, and John talked about that around, he uses the traditional lean term of 3P, production preparation process. Um, I remember seeing a couple of weeks ago, maybe a few weeks ago, a segment on the news, I believe, about a hospital that, they had their tent up, they had their stations set up, and they were physically walking through the process, right? Similar to a dress
Mm-hmm.
rehearsal. And the whole idea of that process is you don't know what you're going to face until you face it. So try to face it with as much reality as possible, right? Now you can't,
Mm-hmm.
well, you can, let me talk about that in a second, but it's never going to be as real as reality. But
Sure.
if you bring in the nurses or whoever's going to administer the shots, if you bring in imaginary patients and have them walk through the process um, as if they were getting a shot, you start to say, well, geez, I don't have what I need at my workstation, or the flow isn't
Mm-hmm.
right, or now this only works if you're really observing for the intent of improvement. Um, but if you have that culture already, then this sort of physical manifestation of a future process, is a great way to really field test
Mm-hmm.
what you intend to do.
Yeah. And there are things that can be worked through, like Salem Health. I'll make sure we link to this as well. had a video that they shared that walked through their whole process. It was like a big convention center type open room, and there are multiple steps in the process. And there were things that we could look at, looking at the different steps. So you have working backward. Before the patient is sent home, they have to be observed for 15 or 30 minutes, depending on whether they have a history of allergies or not. And then, there's paperwork and a card and documentation. Then there's the injection, and then there's the preparation of the syringe, and then there's the flow and the supply chain of the vaccine itself. And so you could look at these different steps and look at, how long does it take to dilute the vaccine and draw it into a syringe and label it with the lot number and have it ready to go. That's a pretty predictable, repeatable process. And then the time it takes to prep and do the injection would be a predictable, repeatable process. So you could figure out, how many syringe prep stations do you need to flow vaccine out to all of the different injection stations. That could be all designed. And then there's the flow of supplies of Band-Aids and gloves and other things. Like in the one video, they talked about a process where I was trying not to be judgmental. I'm as guilty of this as anybody. They said, well, when we run out of something, we hold up this blue card and a runner brings us more. And I'm like, the trigger for the reorder should be before you run out. And actually, at this hospital, I know a former Toyota person who's coaching them. They are working on setting up a 2-bin Kanban system. So again, to be fair, sometimes you've got to set up the basics, and then you can refine that process and make sure you don't have tables that are cluttered and overflowing with stuff. But gloves and Band-Aids, those are so inexpensive and so small. I would err on the side of a little too much inventory instead of trying to do this zero inventory just in time model.
Well, and that's, I certainly, you can imagine if we hear a news story that says we can't give more shots because there's a Band-Aid shortage, right? And you start to hear the wrong shortages in the process.
Well, so actually, I heard a podcast with continuous improvement people from a hospital that said at one point they had to stop the flow of vaccination because they ran out of Band-Aids.
Yeah.
And I've stepped back and questioned, of all the times I've had a flu shot, is the Band-Aid really necessary, or is that over processing, and is that just habit?
Yeah, and could you just save it for those that are bleeders, right? So and just keep going, and okay, if you're bleeding, just keep holding your arm because you got to sit there for 15 minutes anyway. But it does. I think the two problems that make those issues more complex is that, if you could run a prototype vaccination center in 3P mode and then distribute the model across the country, that'd be one thing. But the number of organizations that we need to actually administer the program is pretty massive, right? Because you have, first, a lot of them went through hospitals where hospitals are busy, right, dealing with actual COVID cases. Quite frankly, probably one of the worst organizations to give vaccines, given their current loading from a resource standpoint. You have county health agencies in Pennsylvania. A lot is done through the county health departments. Not every county in Pennsylvania has a health department. So they're run differently from that regard. And some cases the hospitals are stepping up and doing more. Some cases they're not. We saw in West Virginia where they've done very well. They've relied less on, say, the CVSs and more on local pharmacists, community pharmacists. So the distribution of models of how to do this is so vast that it really requires a combination of system level improvements, best practices at a national level, and then local Kaizen for your own particular circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, I think of this in terms of the flow of vaccine from the producers all the way to the patient. There's the flow of staff. How do you make sure you have enough people? And this often means being creative, like bringing in retirees or medical students. Or, I mean, I get my flu shot from a pharmacist. I mean, it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
a nurse. You could bring in veterinarians or the National Guard, or whatever you have. And then there's the flow of patients. How do you get the right patient to the right place? And then there's maybe flow of supplies.
I would,
But right now, as we record this on January 31st, it seems like we are very much in a supply constrained mode, meaning the vaccine supply.
yeah, yeah, and all the local kaizen in the world won't mean much if we can't even get the vaccine to people. Um, and again, following the Ike quote, I don't want to try to guess at root cause, um, but certainly, I don't want to say it's inexcusable. It's the wrong word, but all the local kaizen in the world won't mean much if they can't get vaccines. And it seems like at a policy level, both local and federal, we've removed whatever constraints were there. It's there's other factors at play. I would add another flow, which is the data flow, um, which
Yeah,
which is certainly secondary, but at the same time, you know, if you look at where we are, is data half of our problem? And the fact that the data, if you have every pharmacist, every hospital, every outsourced agency from a local county health department running the process, how on earth do you expect your data to be accurate without a really, really well designed system, which we don't have for sure. And so then how do you make good decisions if you can't trust your own, not just trust your own data, but then actually not use it to effectively make decisions? So imagine a pull system
yeah,
based on actual consumption. Well, if the data is no good, then you can't have a pull system.
yeah. Well, there's supply chain questions, there's customer demand questions, and there's capacity questions. So I think the one thing in John Miller's analysis, as much as I respect John, and there's a lot of great stuff in that post. I mean, I did not include the concept of tact time in the first edition of Lean Hospitals because it gets complicated. So there's 350 million people in the United States, roughly,
Mhm.
and so how do you come up with a demand rate tact time when we might all say, even bad, bad assumption. I know we won't all say, but let's assume 350 million people say, yes, I want the vaccine tomorrow. Do we calculate the tact time based off of that? Well, probably not. So we have to look at the supply picture of how many doses can be provided per day, per week. And I think we just need to have things in balance. And I read about one hospital that they were on a pace of delivering 2,000 doses a day. So there's a capacity, work capacity, supply capacity. They proved that was possible. And then suddenly, oh, now you're only getting 200 doses a day. So part of me says, like, well, why'd they ramp up to that capacity of 2,000 a day when they could have leveled it out and done 500 a day? But giving vaccines earlier is better than waiting. So
Certainly.
can we level load it? Is this more like when I worked at Dell Computer, when we would have big spikes in demand and it was costly to hold capacity to respond to those spikes in demand, but that was the Dell strategy. It was not a level loading strategy.
Well, and
So, there's all these different dynamics, and I don't think we can say, well, there is a single lean solution. I think we need to figure out what makes sense in these circumstances.
right, and I'd say, first is you have to pick the right metrics that matter, right? So I think the efficiency of the system is you know it does matter just because we only have so many resources to go around, and so we have to make the most of them. But it
Yeah,
doesn't matter nearly as much as getting the job done. And so if yeah, we vaccinate a whole bunch extra people faster and sooner, and then we have resources standing around, kind of like who cares, because we got the job done. We're talking about $1 trillion aid package. Well, if we got the job done with COVID, we wouldn't need as much of an aid package, right? So to me, it's much more about effectiveness over efficiency. But the other thing this points to, then, to your point around the complexity, is the idea that there's a single problem to solve, like it's a supply problem, or it's a tack time problem, or it's a right. It's all of those, right?
Right.
At every level, at the system level, at the federal system level, at the state system level, at the hospital system level, the supply chain level, at the data level, at the actual needle and arm level. You need your best practices. You need your continuous improvement happening there at every one of those levels. And some people will say, well, just find the bottleneck and solve that. But when there's enough variation in a system like that, you need it at every level. Now, I think an interesting correlation might be the rate of learning and sharing that happened with the disease itself. Right? Yes, it took months and months and months, but if you look at how much was shared and studied across hospitals, how to treat, protocol, bedside protocol, medical protocol, etc., from hospital to hospital, from doctor to doctor, from country to country, from March through the fall, till we started to sort of really start to narrow in on best practices. A ton of progress was made. Now that was a long time. That was a lot. I hope it does. I hope we can do even better with this. But I do have hope that best practices will spread in the same sense. That once we prove to ourselves we can do certain things, we will start to do those things.
Right. Well, so there's been so much learning. Again, this is where I try not to be judgmental when it comes to the design of the vaccine delivery process. Like, we've known for at least 9 months that this day was coming, right? So when we've got these supply constraints, if you're only getting 200 doses a day, today is the day to design a process that can deliver 2,000 locally if you had the supply. And if not 2,000, why not 4,000? And so, there's that opportunity to not just wait and react, but to be proactive and to plan and to design. But, you look at the different measures. John talked about setting up different hubs, and, I think, if you're the only metric you were trying to hit was vaccinating the highest number of people, you would set up in the largest cities around the country, but then that raises issues around equity. What about people in small towns? Do they deserve the vaccine just the same? There are questions and concerns about, communities, people of color not getting as much access to the vaccine. And so we have to take those societal questions into account as well. So it really is, it's a multidimensional problem. I'm thinking, as an industrial engineer, there's no single variable that we're trying to optimize upon here. There are many, many different objectives, including speed, including who do you vaccinate first in a way that makes the most sense for society and is fairest to people. There's the questions of equity. It's a complicated problem. So I'm looking forward to a day, and I'm trying to figure out how to volunteer even with the county health department here in Los Angeles. Now the problem is we have a glut of vaccine and we can't vaccinate enough people a day. Like, I think the lean skill set is particularly, able to contribute to that problem. But one other thought I'll share here is there are supply chain visibility problems where there are millions of doses literally unaccounted for right now. Like, the federal government under the past administration, they know how many they've sent out to the states. And then there's not much visibility until the federal government starts getting reports back of how many vaccinations have actually been given. And so I saw a report today in the new administration. And again, this isn't political. This is just managerial skill or what lack thereof. But the new administration has people like literally picking up the phone and calling and trying to find out how much vaccine do you have, and trying to piece together this supply chain visibility. I mean, 20 years ago when I worked at Dell Computer, there was far better visibility into the supply chain of PC components and exactly where those PCs were. If we sent an order of 10,000 computers to the US Navy, somebody could tell you exactly where those computers were, I'm sure, at every point in the chain until they got to somebody's desk.
Mm-hmm. Now we have, we look at, um, how many different locations we're going to, right? Just the county I live in right now has probably got 40 different locations that has received vaccine at one level or the other. And, I don't know about you, but anytime I receive something from FedEx, I'm left wondering for certain data, like, oh, your shipment will arrive today. Well, it's in Ohio still. How's it going to arrive today? It's not going to arrive today. Stop telling me that. So, yeah, we definitely have, and that goes back to my data point, right? The flow of data.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Are we missing vaccines, or are we missing data about the vaccines? I think it's more likely, based on the numbers we're talking about, that we're missing data more than we're actually missing vaccines at that number, at that kind of volume.
Yeah. But think from a planning perspective, I'll draw a parallel to the auto industry. So, Jamie, when you were, at Chrysler, you knew how many cars you could build a day. But if I were to tell you, Jamie, you need to figure out this next week's plan in terms of staffing and people, I don't know how many engines you're going to get. So plan to build effectively and efficiently. So this is the situation the hospitals are in. They're not getting advanced visibility generally. I've heard enough of them complain about, we don't know how much vaccine is showing up.
Right.
So how can you coordinate the flow of people in terms of scheduling and prioritizing, and the flow of staff? Because you don't want to bring people in to staff up and sit around this basically empty convention center.
No, but
that has nothing to do.
There's ways to design that system too, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is a good situation, right? But I mean, if you look at a utility that deals with a storm outage, or heck, every county that right now is dealing with this nor'easter going through the Mid-Atlantic, or military reacting to whatever happens next that they can't predict, right? There's ways to plan for an unpredictable environment. And so it's like, okay, you're all on call, and when we get the vaccine, your phone's going to ring with this notice and you show up, right? I'm not saying it's easy, right? I'm just saying you can plan, you can build a system to accommodate almost anything predictably if you put the effort into the planning and the design. And the time to really do this,
great point.
We knew 80% of what we needed to know to plan last summer. And, we didn't know everything about which vaccine would be first. We didn't know it would be Moderna or Pfizer, and we'd have to deal. The refrigeration issue does not seem to be the limiting issue, but is an issue for sure. So certainly, we didn't know everything, but that's when cases were the lowest. That was the perfect time to be planning, right? Every hospital, and it's not just hospitals, right? It's a lot of different organizations. Most counties, it sounds like, or many counties, are using the same third-party agencies they're using to run testing centers. They're going to use to run the vaccine program, because they're already set up, and they're set up at that volume. Now, I don't know what happens to testing in the meantime. That's a concern. We have months and months and months, if not a year of this, and if we lose our testing capacity in order to get vaccines, I'm not sure that's an awesome trade-off. But we did have time to plan for a whole bunch of things, right? And that's the opportunity to say, what is the system, and who's in charge of it, right? Now hospitals, as well as the pharmaceutical companies, are busy. But this is the same continuous improvement advice I give to every organization. They'll say, oh, We can't deal with that. We're busy inventing and ramping
Yeah.
up the new vaccine. Well, that's great, but that's 20%. You know, if you look at Pfizer, what percentage of the company was involved in actually that? No more than 20% at the highest, for sure. Right? They were, and the executive level, sure, top executives more focused on getting the vaccine ready and approved and all those sorts of things. But what are these resources over here doing, right? Can they be pulled in to focus on doing the work ahead of when the need is? That's the opportunity that uh, too often seems to have been missed.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is such a complex, complicated issue. We could talk about this for a full work day. We did the panel discussion 90 minutes. That could have been an 8-hour panel discussion. We had two people from UMass Memorial Healthcare in Massachusetts. We had somebody from a senior care organization in Pennsylvania, and we had the Secretary of Health and Human Resources from Virginia talking about that. And we'll put a link to that and other resources in the show notes. It's a sticky, complicated problem. There are good examples out there of, I guess, the thought I would add maybe to wrap it up is I've heard many stories of the organizations that have been working for years to build a quote unquote lean culture or a culture of continuous improvement. They're the ones best positioned to iterate, to learn, to plan, to learn, to iterate, to engage their people. There are great success stories out there. And there's also opportunity to share lessons learned and quote unquote best practices, not just to copy, but maybe to adopt and adapt. And the team at KaiNexus and the people at Value Capture, who I also work with, even tomorrow, we're going to continue this discussion of how do we put together, some sort of forum for healthcare organizations to kind of in real time share notes with each other. Some of that is just the willingness to do so. Some of that's technology. We're trying to figure out some of those things.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping to see more of is, these little, some of them are big problems that have to be solved. Some of them are small problems, but much more sharing of what people are doing. If you look at, you and I both travel a bunch, or at least we both used to, and
Used to.
a small little thing of a TSA agent that works his way up the line and tells everybody what they need to know about getting ready for the conveyor, right? That one little step, which isn't a policy, it isn't a process, it's just what some TSA agents decide to do because they know it makes the process better. And I could imagine the same thing happens here where people get up to the station and it takes them 10 minutes to get their sleeve up because they didn't wear the right shirt. And if they would have just had 5 minutes more notice, they could have prepped themselves.
Yeah.
But what I'm hoping for is, 1,000 YouTube videos of healthcare practitioners and other logistical agencies sharing their best practices as openly as possible so that, adoption, at least at the micro level of improvement, goes up. I really do believe, just if you look at the rate at which we learned how to deal with uh, the virus itself, whether personal practice or at the hospital, and how to treat it, so much was learned and so much was shared through places like YouTube. I'm hoping the same things will happen here.
Yeah. One other thought now, you mentioned coming out and dealing with a line. There was a story, gosh, I forget what state it was, but if you've ever gone through a Chick-fil-A drive-through or In-N-Out Burger, same way. When that line gets long, they don't let you get all the way up to the microphone box that you traditionally order from. They bring people out with tablets and they take the order further in the line, and man, that line flows because at some point it was somebody's Kaizen of like, we need to get out of the chicken sandwich making building and go take orders further upstream. And In-N-Out is really good about managing that. But there was a story, I think, of some county that had this huge traffic problem of cars lined up to come in for vaccination. And literally, like a Chick-fil-A store manager
Yeah.
came in and started helping manage some of that process. So there are lessons to learn, not just from hospital to hospital, but from your community and people who have operations expertise. I hope there's more opportunities to share and help out like that.
You've got it. I think we will see more of that, and I do have confidence in our ability to do more fixing than finger pointing, and things will get better. But we do have a long way to
Yeah. Well, so we'll keep at it. We can probably talk about it in the next episode if you want.
go. Yep, we could talk about it for quite a while. So, ready to start heading towards wrap up?
Yeah, let's do a fun question. I mean, I think vaccine talk is interesting, but we've got a fun topic to kind of help bring it to a close.
Yeah. So
So that topic, go ahead.
yeah. As lots of people have been doing during the pandemic, is spending more time at home, and that leads to all sorts of new hobbies rediscovered or first discovery. So the fun question is, what's your favorite board game? Um,
Yeah,
I'd be curious what our listeners have to say. If they want to comment, we'll certainly welcome their thoughts. So what's
yep.
your answer to that one?
So my wife loves the game Clue, and then in fact the '80s movie based on the game is a favorite of hers. I like it too. She loves it. So we did play that over the holidays with her parents. So it's good, kind of logic based game of what can you figure out based there's different strategies I think to figure out based on information and information you don't know, who committed the murder, where, and with what, like that. It was fun to revisit that game. I hadn't played it in a long time.
That's good.
But if Cards Against Humanity counts as a board game, that's our favorite.
Okay.
And that's a game we have. We'll play that with not just friends, but also with my in-laws. It's kind of raunchy. It's not a family game, but that's probably the game I have the most fun playing.
We actually haven't played that, so maybe it's time. Our kids are getting older, so they're not a lot of secrets anymore. But
It's not, yeah. I mean, it's a family game if the family's up for it. So you want to read through those cards first
yeah,
and see if the kids are old enough.
our family doesn't hold back a whole lot. So yeah, so I hate games that are. I'm not a big fan of pure luck games like we used to play shoots and ladders with the kids. It's just to roll the die is what it is. There's no strategy.
Yeah.
Um, and then trivia games, like I'm good with certain
Hmm.
parts of trivia, like the science questions. But then it's like, what actor played in this? I'm like, I have no clue. I'm gonna lose
Yeah.
that category every time. So Risk and Monopoly were always favorites of mine, both classics. There was enough strategy involved that you could really think your way through the game. Um, Monopoly, we don't play a whole lot anymore. I mean, my youngest used to play it so much. He would set up when he was tiny. He would set up stuffed animals, and he'd have a four-person game going all by himself. Um, and he was sort of
Wow.
vicious again. He really put himself in each role, and he was vicious. And um, but he could also do the math like that, but on all on all the money. But yeah, but we've gotten to almost petty with Monopoly, where um, I can stay in the game by making this trade, but if the trade will help you, so I'm not going to do it. So that,
Yeah.
that's kind of taking some of the fun out of it. But I would say if anybody's familiar with the game Apples to Apples, it's a neat game where there's an adjective card, and then everybody has a noun card, a handful of noun cards, and they put a noun card down, and then there's a judge that decides which noun best fits the adjective. Um, so it's fun, and there's a judge. It's very subjective. But my daughter a few years ago made a flinchball family edition where it's
Yeah.
it's it's basically both adjectives as well as nouns that really apply to us, whether it's inside jokes or it's favorite eateries or it's our own names, and it's a really fun version of that game because we're playing
Hmm.
on sort of inside knowledge about the family. It's hard to play with other people but for us, it's probably my favorite. And just the fact that she put that much time and effort into it was super cool. So that's a favorite of mine.
That is cool. That is cool. We did play a version of Monopoly over the holidays. It's called Wineopoly,
I've seen that.
and so instead of the traditional Monopoly properties, they are wine regions. And so we decided we were going to play, the instructions for Monopoly or this game talk about a short version where everyone starts off. You randomly deal out a handful of properties just to get things going, and those were dealt out. And I noticed I was randomly given. I wasn't the dealer. I got the equivalent of Boardwalk and Park Place. I'm like, oh, good, I'm set. But then whoever in the family was dealing them out realized, like, oh, I gave out too many cards. So then this is where it was a matter of ethics or stupidity on my part. I kind of randomly shuffled up the cards and gave a couple of them back, including Park Place. And then partway into the game, I thought, I should have kept those two. Yeah. Top properties. Bordeaux, it was like Bordeaux and Champagne. I'm like,
Yep.
I mean, so I ended up losing the game. I'm like, it's just a game. I don't know. But
I think
I would have been better positioned if I just kept and hoarded those two.
Yeah, for sure. I think we might have given that away as a gift at one of our wine parties. I can't remember for sure, but we've had 4 or 5 different versions of Monopoly, including the Cars edition from the movie Cars. When the kids were really young, and the Cheaters edition, which doesn't get a lot of play because nobody really trusts anybody. But you actually cheat, and it's like, well, if you get away with it, you get a bonus, and if you get caught, you get penalized. It's an interesting version.
How do you cheat? You move your piece to a place that didn't match the roll.
Cards, and it's everything from steal money from another person's pile to switch properties with somebody. It's all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's all about whether you get caught or not during your turn. It got played a couple of times, but not too often. But I'll have to check out Wineopoly. But like I said, our family's kind of gone against Monopoly, so I'm not sure adding wine is going to solve anything there. So
yeah. All right. Well, cool. Well, good. We'll look forward to playing Cards Against Humanity with you sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably not an episode of Lean Whiskey, but we'll
no. But in person, someplace, sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I guess that's it for this week, for this episode, I should say.
Yep, I think that's it.
Well, we want to thank everybody for listening and hanging out with us here. If you want to check out the past episodes, 24. Wow.
Yeah.
Episode 24. You can find everything at leanwhiskey.com. You can spell whiskey either of the two internationally recognized ways, and it will forward to my website, Lean Blog. If you also want show notes and links for this episode in particular, you can go to leanblog.org/whiskey24. And I think you have to spell that KEY 24. Or you can go to Jamie's website.
Yep, at jflynch.com/lean whiskey. You'll see all the episodes there, as well as along with plenty of other things, including the rest of my blog posts.
And we hope you'll look for us. If you're listening for the first time, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all the major places you can find podcasts. I guess if you're listening to it, you've managed to find us. So thank you, but please do subscribe.
Yep. And in addition to subscribing, please rate us, review us, ask us questions. These are things that not only help us make the show better, but help other people find it and gain access. They don't have to listen. They all have that choice, but those rates and reviews and subscriptions help other people to find it. So it really helps us out and helps them out as well. So we really appreciate any of that support you can give us.
Yeah. And thank you to everybody who has rated or reviewed. And just one other thing I'm going to say, just from a technical standpoint, we've always recorded these through Zoom, but we recorded this episode through a different system I've been using called Riverside.fm, which hopefully leads to better audio quality, better video quality. But Jamie, if we want to experiment again with a live episode, the system would allow us to line people up in advance to do a quote unquote call in
Mm-hmm.
to ask a question. So there are some things maybe we can continue experimenting with and playing around. But either way, it's always fun to do this. So thanks for doing these podcasts.
Yeah, thank you. And this is our third calendar year of these episodes. Lots obviously happened since then, but it's fulfilled the expectations of being a fun experiment. And um, I've been better and better at taking my weekends off from work. But and this is a Sunday night. This was always like as we intended, hanging out with a friend, talking shop, having a drink. So, cheers.
Yep. Cheers. Thanks, Jamie.